Welcome everyone. We're giving everyone a moment to sign in and get settled. Feel free to shout out, say hi in the chat. Let us know where you're tuning in from today. We'll get started in just a moment.
Wow. Josh's comment about sweater weather on Long Island last night.
Oh, that sounds nice. Barefoot in Portland here.
Yeah.
All right, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to Preview Week for Willamette the Pinot Noir auction. The 2019 Willamette Valley wines featured in this tasting series are exclusive small lot bottlings for our wine trade auction. If you don't know about the auction and you'd like to learn more about how to purchase these wines, you can contact Emily at the WVWA, and I put her email address in the chat. I'd like to take a moment to thank all of our sponsors for their ongoing support. And an extra special thank you to our Imperial sponsor, Winebow. And now I'd like to introduce today's speakers. Representing lot number 81, Tyson Crowley of Crowley Wines. Representing lot 82, Kate Ayres of Penner-Ash. Representing lot 83, Gilles de Domingo of Cooper Mountain Vineyards. Representing lot 84, Larry Stone, Lingua Franca. And Matt Ollila, I think, might be joining us late. He will be representing lot 85, Plum Hill. And then we have lot 86, Justin Hirigoyen of Twomey. And our host, moderator Eugenia Keegan of Jackson Family Wines. Eugenia, take it away.
Julia, thank you. Here we are on day 5. I like to think of this as a relay race. And of course, you always hand the baton to the fastest runner or the fastest swimmer. So here we are filling up the rear. This is number 14 of 15. So it's been a long week and Julia gets the prize for being here for every one of them, which has been really great. We have a wonderful panel of on this particular session, a lot of really fun lots. We thought before we jumped into the lots, we'd talk a little bit about the 19 vintage. And one of the great joys of this particular auction is that it's focused on a single variety and a single vintage. And it really helps in the comparison of wines to look at what everybody's doing. I remember Salud would do the same thing. We'd focus on a single vintage, and everybody, of course, is pulling their absolute best gems out of the cellar and creating these unique lots. And it's such an opportunity to wrap your head around a vintage through the wines themselves. But it was a real change up for us after several warm vintages, even 17 that cooled down a little bit, not in comparison to 19. It felt like sort of old Oregon, which of course means rain. But we had a sort of cool period in the October to the end of the year, 18. But then we had an unusually cold spring. We've been having wet, warm springs, and this year we had a wet, cold spring. And then we had a few frost opportunities, and then it warmed up with a little bit of rain, which certainly put some disease pressure on the vintage itself. But the summer itself was reasonably cool. We often use a measure of how many days over 90 degrees and 95 degrees to help us understand the heat spikes. And we really didn't have those. We had 3 or 4 days, 10, maybe at the most in the 90 to 100 range, whereas the previous year we had at least twice that. So we just didn't have those heat spikes, which really allowed that longer entry into the vintage, which we love so much. But then we had a pretty cool September and we had quite a bit of rain. And, 13, we talk about rain. That was pretty much a single incident with a lot of rain. This was several incidences with a little bit of rain, but they add up, and they add up to fruit damage if you're not careful. So that was some of the challenge. October turned unusually cold. I remember we finished harvest on October 17th. In fact, we've got Kate here, and that was probably Kate Penarash coming in at the latter part of the season. And it made for a vintage that, although the rain could complicate things, it was long, beautiful, drawn out. There wasn't the rush to pick in front of heat, not wanting things to get overripe. So in the end, we have what I would consider an absolutely classic Oregon vintage. And these wines are not just beautiful, but they will stand the test of time in your cellar, which is another thing that is very exciting for us, because we do pride ourselves on the ageability of wine Pinot Noirs from the Willamette Valley. I think we'll see that in our Chardonnays as well. So with that little overview, we're going to get rolling here. Matt, thank you. You're here. It's great to see you. I need to get my cheat sheet here. Thank you. So we're going to start with lot 81. I thought I could remember all these, but clearly I can't. We're going to start with lot 81, which is the Crowley lot. Tyson, welcome, and give us a little background on you. You know, you're a small vineyard, and we don't see as much of you around. So tell us what's going on at Crowley.
Yeah, well, I've been in the wine industry for quite a while. I started in 1995 at Ayres, so that's 26 years, and I've seen a lot of rainy vintages. So definitely used to that. Rob Stewart and I were great pals, and that experience as well was awesome because I got to work with Dick Erath, who was still involved at that time. So that was first job, was 1995 to 2001, and then in the spring of 2002, I went to New Zealand, came back, and worked that fall with Brickhouse and J.K. Carrier. So that was the harvest of 2002. And then in 2003, the spring of 2003, I took a job with Cameron. I got an offer to be his assistant, and I had never worked in the viticulture end of winemaking. At that point, it was just cellar and some lab work, and definitely saw a lot of vintages come and go. But at that stage, I was interested in working in the vineyard, so I took that job, and that's where I started Crowley Wines. So in 2005, John allowed me to make 4 barrels of Pinot Noir at his cellar. And then in 2006, I made 6 barrels, 2 of which were Chardonnay. And then in 2007, I moved Crowley Wines to the August Cellars Co-op, which is in Newburgh. And that's where we are today. So we're in our 15th, right around 15th vintage, but I've seen a bunch of them, and we're about 3,000 cases. We source from many vineyard sites, 3 Dundee Hill sites, and then the 4 Winds site, which I'll talk about more as we go along. But that's a site we farm now, and just recently picked up a vineyard out of Ollila Amity too. So we're expanding. We're around 3,200 cases, and I specialize in Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. And I was fortunate to work with producers that really valued Chardonnay, that being Doug Tennell and John Paul. So that became a passion for me pretty early on. And of course, Pinot. I didn't know a lot about Pinot when I came here in 95, but I was really lucky at that time. ERAP was pouring the 93s out of the tasting room. And so I got to go up and sample the 93s. And as you guys may well know, that was one of Oregon's best vintages. So I kind of was spoiled there, and fell in love with Oregon's terroir. And it's just been a blast. I love seeing the industry evolve. And yeah, it just keeps being interesting and engaging. And I love making wine here.
It's interesting, Tyson, you brought up working at ERATH, and we were seeing a common theme on the call before. We had Gary Horner and Rob Stewart, both ERATH alumni, and we had some Adelsheim alumni. And it's interesting watching, so many people come out of those original wineries and take that experience forward, not unlike your experience.
It was more valuable as time went on. I was really new to the concept of terroir, and being my first job in wine. And at that time, Dick was working with all the best vineyards in Dundee, the Prince Hill, Juilliard, even, the Goldschmidt Vineyard, and, all of them, they were all just kind of that whole stretch of road there. Every vineyard we had, Marsh, and they all tasted different, and it was super, super awesome. The wines were clear and transparent. And so for me, it was a great experience to get to know wine through that lens. And, we made the wines pretty simply. It was a big winery, but for me, I just came to appreciate the idea of terroir so much there. And that kind of stuck with me and later I realized how important that was to how I view wine and how I view making wine. And it was that experience that really did it for me. And it was definitely rich, and it was a lot of work. Rob and I, when we see each other, we just shake our heads and wonder what the heck we were
young.
doing.
You were young then and able to do it. We actually go sweat on the call, Winderly. So the Goldschmidt Vineyard got a tour on the earlier call as well. Thank you, Tyson.
Sure.
Oh, Eugenia, you're muted.
Exactly. That's the joke. You're on mute. Thank you. I'm so glad you fell for it. So Kate Ayres is up next from Penner-Ash, and it is lot number 82. And I'm so amused by this. Kate probably won't tell this story, so I'm going to tell on her. But with the winemaking team of Lynn, Penner-Ash, Kate, her assistant Lauren, and their cellar master Nolan, obviously they all had to taste together during Zoom and during the pandemic and do all of their blends. And as you know, they make 472 single vineyards at that place. So there's a lot of work to be done. And they did it all on Zoom, and they would put together 4 sets of samples and off they would go. And so you're on mute, I think, became unfortunately a buzzword of the blending process. So I thought this was an absolutely perfectly timed name, and you'll never get to use it again. So it was just perfect. So Kate, please take it away, lot number 82.
Because what we all need to do is really remember 2020. Welcome, everybody. I'm Kate Ayres. I've been with Penner-Ash for the past 5 years. I started my career back in 2006 in Napa Valley for Cakebread Cellars, where I spent the 06 and 08 vintages. From there, I went to Portugal, New Zealand, and Australia before finding myself back here in the great state of Oregon, where I was born and raised, working for Bethel Heights. 2010 was obviously a semi-trying year, not quite like 2011, but it gave me the absolute passion to get back here to Oregon and find my future here. That said, I spent the following 5 years back in Napa Valley making Cabernet of all grapes before landing this job at Penner-Ash here. So that's kind of the quick and dirty of my life and career. Penner-Ash, as most of you probably know, and Eugenia just stated, we specialize in single vineyards. So again, looking through that lens of what terroir will give and what each vineyard expresses, I think that's the true essence of Pinot Noir. And I think it's what we all love as winemakers, is what each of those vineyards are expressing and what we can do to craft that into the wine that we're ultimately looking for. So I hope you see with our blend, which I think we'll be talking about shortly, but it's quite the vast mixture of vineyards that we source from. We source from about 20 different vineyards here in the Willamette Valley. So I really get my fair share of seeing what's out there, which is truly incredible.
This has to be kind of a fun opportunity, because obviously your single vineyards are single vineyard, and your Willamette Valley is a bigger blend. So this is an opportunity to play around with those wines in a slightly different format. So
there's nothing like playing around with 20 different vineyards for 5 cases of wine, right?
Okay, well, you could make it 10 next year.
Right? No, but then we'd have to do just 500 mils instead of 1,500 mils.
That's great. Thank you, Kate. We talked a lot this morning about biodynamics as well. That came up in several conversations, and one of the longest standing biodynamic vineyards is Cooper Mountain. And we've got Gilles here to discuss Cooper Mountain with us. Good morning, Gilles.
Good morning. I'm sorry for my strong Californian accent. Now, me, I came in US, in fact. Coupe Mountain, I started at Coupe Mountain in 2005 with a focus on working first on vineyard, improving the vineyards and developing and improving the biodynamic principle while making the same way. Before Coupe Mountain, I was in fact arrived in Oregon by mistake, purely by mistake, by missing a fly in 1995. And I was hired on the spot by King Estate Winery when we started King Estate. I discovered Oregon and fall in love with Oregon. Originally, I'm a Bordeaux guy, Saint-Emilion. I still control a winery and a vineyard in Bordeaux and in Spain, the area. And I fall in love with Coupe Mountain because of biodynamic. I was very curious initially about biodynamic. I am a big believer. And on Coupe Mountain, we produce 18,000 cases of wines, 100% certified organic and biodynamic. And we play with the notion of terroir, of course. Several types of vineyards. We own 5 vineyards. We do not buy fruit, purely estate. And the wine I present is, in fact, a vineyard we acquired in 2018. We started the first vintage in 2018. It was a long planted vineyard. The name is Corin Vineyard. Before it was named Ollila Vineyard. Before it was named, I don't remember what it was named. And the wine I present is only 2 tons of one block. Where we did, because it was on transition to be certified organic, the 3 years transition. And I was like that, I was playing with the fruit for fun. And there's a vineyard with a complex on the soil, a lot of landslide with rocky soil on one side. Quite an interesting terroir style and a pure expression of radio of Oregon.
So Gilles, the new vineyard, how was it farmed when you bought it?
It was commercially farmed.
Yeah, and you're moving that to biodynamic?
On the day one, as soon as we acquire, as soon as I could, in fact, enter the vineyard, we decided, okay, transition means stop anything, cultivation of soil, and a transition on certification for organic and biodynamic. Yeah. And it will be officially certified because the law wants 3 years transition period. It will be certified finally this year, 100% biodynamic and organic.
Well, it feels like you bought that vineyard yesterday, and now here it is, what, 4 years later, and you're getting your certification. Time flies.
Oh yeah, no.
Yeah.
There's some work, there's some work, but I love this kind of things. In fact, we love that.
Yeah.
We love to hear.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's super exciting. Lot number 84 is Lingua Franca, and I don't think that Larry Stone needs much introduction to the world of wine. If you don't know who he is, then you just climbed out from under a rock. It's a real treat to have Larry here today to talk about the Lingua Franca wine, Up and Up. Larry, give us your 3-sentence CV, if you would, please. Otherwise, we'll be here for days.
Right. Yeah. But I'll start because most people know my restaurant career. So I'll start at a point that most people don't know. I was born in the Northwest, born in Seattle. So it's in that enemy state called Washington that we're at war with perpetually. And so I'm an enemy spy here. But I was always, because I grew up there, I was very interested in wines of the Northwest as they developed, because I'm so old that there really weren't very many wines of the Northwest of quality at that time. And it developed, by the time I was a teenager, we started to see, people like David Lett come up here and David Adelsheim. And so there were others, that are gone now, their wineries are rolled into other wineries. But I was always interested in wine. My parents were interested in wine and food. My dad worked at the market when I was young. So I have a food background on both sides of the family. My mother were farmers and winemakers. My dad were bakers in Europe. And we perpetuated the idea of fresh, wholesome food from the farm, back in the 50s when people were eating TV dinners. And my first, because I was a scholar, I was studying chemistry first and then literature. I went to Europe and I studied in Vienna, and that's where I had my first professional wine buying experience in 1972. I bought wine for an inn in the Alps in Burgenland, from the grandparents of people who are now making wine, and it was pretty rustic. And then, one thing led to another, and I became a member. I was a judge for the Enological Society when the first big tasting of Oregon wines happened in 1979, and that was a revelation. I got to meet all the pioneers, Richard Summers and all these other people that are no longer there, but also people like David Adelsheim and David Lett and Dick Ponzi and all these people that were just kind of new. It was all, pretty much brand new, and Riesling was still a big deal in Oregon. So, we had, I went from there. I became, then my restaurant career, people may know, became a best sommelier in America, master sommelier, best sommelier in the world, and in 1988. And I was privileged to work with Charlie Trotter and help him develop his restaurant. And I created Rubicon, and I also created Evening Land. So that's another thing people might realize with the founder. In 1996, it was my idea. I said, the biggest revelation I ever had in Oregon was from the old Amity Hills. That's why I'm here now. And I said it was Seven Springs Vineyard, the first harvest that David Adelsheim made. That was my big revelation. And I didn't realize at the time, but Bethel Heights, I've been able to taste them in the meantime. Bethel Heights made a single cuvee from that vineyard, and so did Christum. So, and St. Innocent. So 4 wineries made a single cuvee on the first crop, and it's always been very good fruit. So when I had the opportunity, when I created Evening Light, I said, you should get something near there. And I didn't know they would actually get a lease on Seven Springs. And when I ran it, I looked across the road, and here I am right in the heart of the old Amity Hills on these very shallow soils, blessed by the Van Duzer corridor winds coming over the hill, but not being too strong up here. So it's like air conditioning rather than strong winds as it can be, because I live at the top of the hill. It can be 35-mile-an-hour winds up there, and it's like a nice, gentle, cooling breeze down here, which is great. So I love this place, and so I'm very privileged. I feel privileged that I could buy a farm in 2012 and convert it to a vineyard. And I wanted to be organic officially, but then my wife said, organic farming isn't good enough, and yet he didn't believe in everything in biodynamics. So we're in the process of now trying to be. We could have been certified long ago, but we're going to work for it finally. He sees the merit in being officially certified organic. But we hired Mimi Castile, a wonderful neighbor who's famous for her ideas on regenerative farming, which are very scientific and thoroughly thought through, but they overlap various things like permaculture and biodynamic and organic farming. So we farm with the least impact and the most benefit to the environment. And but we don't adhere necessarily strictly to biodynamic principles.
So Larry, if I'm not mistaken, to get a certified regenerative, you have to have been certified organic. I think right there, it's a progression. If you want to.
Yeah. So we have to take the first steps, and we have been following that. It's just that I don't think there was an official regenerative farming program at the time we began. Right. And so he just said, well, they can do things in organic. I don't like them, and we don't need to do the cow horn thing. So, so it was like, I wanted to be certified from the beginning, but there was a little resistance because of some differences of opinion with what each was doing. And I said, well, you at least qualify for organic, just get it. Even if you don't agree with everything, that's allowed, we're not going to do the things we don't like to do. So now we're going that process. Should be done in a year or so.
Yeah, that's really great. Thank you very much. I didn't know all of that history. And I met you when you were at Trotter's.
Right.
I'll never forget the wine that you served me that night. It was the Mount Eden McGregor.
Wow.
And Chardonnay, and it turned my head. And so did you. And it's been a lifelong adventure since. And I've loved watching you move over to this side of the program. So it's really it's a great extension of your restaurant career and your love of food. Thank you. Next up is Connections, Lot 85. And we have Matt with us from the winery, and I'm very interested in hearing about this. Matt, good morning.
Good morning. Oh, it's been a crazy year. So just remembering less crazy times is nice. And
yeah. Right.
So my name's Matt. I got out of the Navy back in 2010 and started selling wine with a big distributor. Then I had a very bad motorcycle accident in 2012, and RJ invited me to come on over and start showing me the ropes in making wine at Plum Hill. that kind of segued into him having back surgery, not being able to work for about 6 months. And I was kind of trial by fire, just thrown into it.
Best way to learn.
Hey, I love what it's built. So moving over from distribution to production is just a blessing in disguise.
Yeah, no, that's really great. Are you part of one of the new AVAs now? You're up in Gaston. Are you part of Tualatin Hills, or where is that a change for you?
Yep, we are Tualatin Hills AVA now, and it's a wonderful change. Does anything really change with us? No, but it's our friends and family out here, everybody from Apollonie. I mean, it's just a close knit community out here, and it just, now being able to say we're Tualatin Hills AVA, it's just a little bit extra bonus for us.
Yeah, well, we make wines of place, and the more we can define that place, you've been working with those grapes, and you understand their uniqueness, and it's really great to help the consumer as we drill down in our own learning curve.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, thank you. Lot number 86, Twomey. And we have Justin with us. Justin, where are you?
Well, I'm also a spy.
Yeah, I had a feeling. I wanted to see if this was the double spy team here.
Yeah, spy from the South. So you definitely called me out. I appreciate that. But
no problem.
I'm sitting here in California, in Hillsborough, in the Russian River, and at Twomey we've been searching out that place and finding energy of place, really through the lens of Pinot, and I kind of like to say that inevitably that leads to Oregon. And I also want to give a shout out to Chris Burrow, who's our associate winemaker, who is in Dundee, although actually he's sitting in another room here in California because he's visiting us this week. But Chris, jump in the chat and say hello at some point here. But we've been making Pinot Noir for about 20 years now. And we're making Pinot from sites as far south as Santa Barbara in California, and then all the way up to Dundee, which is what we're here to talk about today. So I oversee winemaking for Twomey, which we get pretty spread out, but we're actually a pretty small team. We're really interested in capturing kind of the essence and the energy of each of these individual little places. There he is, Chris, tasting room in Twomey.
Yep, he just chatted in.
Yeah, and so, in Oregon, we're not making that much wine right now, and our focus is the Prince Hill Vineyard. Tyson gave a shout out to Dick Erath and the Prince Hill Vineyard earlier, and we became stewards of that site in 2017. And like he said, it's just this amazing place. These beautiful hills covered in Jory soil, and as anybody who's interested in Pinot, especially in the Willamette Valley, it's kind of one of those places that instantly just kind of, strikes a chord with you. So it's something that I'm really excited to be working with. I've been with Twomey since 2019. So this was my kind of first vintage, and it was quite an introduction into Oregon winemaking of, yes, it does rain here much more than California in vintage, but me personally, I spent some time in Burgundy, so I saw some pretty rainy vintages there. And so that was kind of a good education for, don't panic. It's a vintage to be decisive, but at the same time, we're still going to make great wines, and a lot of times great place shows through no matter what kind of vintage it really is. But the Oregon winemaking community is great. We actually are crushing and fermenting and aging at Lingua Franca, so it's great to have Larry on here as well. And it's been great to work with everybody and learn from the place. And happy to talk about the wine in a little bit, but that's kind of my long story short.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I thought I could call you out on California since I work for a California company. But I've always thought about when you look at the West Coast, if you're up in that airplane and you can't see geopolitical lines, meaning the line between the state of California and the state of Oregon, and you're just looking at the mountain ranges along the West Coast, that's what you're looking at. That's where you're growing these grapes in this coastal mountain climate all the way up and down the coast. So out of humor, what's the temperature in Hillsborough today?
Right now it's not too bad. It's probably mid 70s, but it'll get up to the 80s, 90s probably today.
Yeah, so we'll probably have a warmer day up in the Willamette Valley. And so it's important to recognize that really July is equally as warm as California and often a degree or two warmer. And then we get closer in August. And then of course, by September, we have two completely different environments. But it's fun at this time of the year to sort of look back and forth at those temperature gauges. So thank you very much for that. So one of the things we like to do is talk about the wines themselves. And why don't we go through the same order, because it's numeric, and no matter how much wine I drink, I seem to know the numbers in the alphabet. So I tend to rely on them heavily for reference points. And with that, I'm going to go back to Tyson. Tell us a little about this specific wine, if you would. Handshake.
Yeah, so it's primarily for me about the vineyard and the block in the vineyard. The vineyard being Four Winds, and then the block I selected for this wine it's called Block 1, and we talked about the vintage being great, but so the wine for me is this kind of great combination of great vintage, great site, great block, which has I think really excellent material in it. So I really am a judge of kind of all three of those things when it comes to great wine. This vineyard is called Four Winds. Like I said, it's outside of McMinnville. It's not actually in an AVA officially. It's it's a little slice of the foothills of the Coast Range between the Yamhill Carlton and McMinnville AVAs. Mm-hmm. It's a volcanic soil. It's not the Jory, it's an Acaia, so it's a little shallower than the Jory. And so the primary, I work with a bunch of Dundee Hills sites. That's kind of where I came up in most of my winemaking. I love Dundee Hills, but I like this soil series because it's a little bit leaner. So I first took on the site through the Chardonnay, thought this was pretty amazing, and then took on the Pinot later, and I found it really feminine, and it really was a great counterpoint to the fruit I've been working with out of Dundee. And I just really love it. And then the Old Vine Pommard is own rooted. They're just it's just the most gorgeous vineyard, especially at pruning, when the vines are just sort of totally bare. They're just big and mossy, and I just love that. Dundee has a bunch of that too. If you drive up and down, you see the Marsh Vineyard, and I think old vines are just really special, and they kind of communicate something that is kind of hard to put your finger on, but I feel like the wines always go up a few levels with old vines. So this is really some of my most precious fruit. And the story behind the name, the handshake deal, the history of the vineyard for me was, I picked it up in 2010. I was in Seattle with Patty Green, a tasting, late Patty Green, and we were sharing a distributor at the time. We were next to each other throughout the tasting. And as you do, when people are next to each other, you taste each other's wines. And she was really into Sauvignon Blanc at the time, and this was 2010. And we had made, I think, 3 vintages. I had made 3 vintages of Chardonnay, and it was this really interesting moment in time in Oregon where Chardonnay just started to kind of come up again. It was kind of in the beginning phase of the sort of the renaissance of the varietal, but she was frustrated with making Chardonnay, which was kind of funny. So she ended up saying, she recognized I liked Chard, and she offered me the block that she had at Four Winds, and it was just an exchange we had there. And I thought it was really cool. It's very memorable as the vineyard has grown in stature for me in my program. And then later on, I ended up with the Pinot. But the block itself, Block 1, is really, for me, the best block in the vineyard. As I said, Old Vine, Pommard. Over the years, I've done more to the vineyard. I realized it was a very special site for Chardonnay. So I've done some grafting and kind of catered the vineyard to more what we need. And I took over the farming last year. So in general, the vineyard's just become a real cornerstone for us, and I really think it's a special spot. And the wines just keep getting better and better from my estimation.
Do you get much wind out there from the Van Duzer Corner?
No, it's further north. It's way up there. It's 650 to 725 feet, and so there's a lot of exposure. So it's quite dynamic. I mean, the disease pressure is always low. It's really easy to do low impact farming there. being, you know, healthy. It's just one of these sites. It just feels super healthy. There's always great airflow, so the farming doesn't need to be, you know, I mean, we farm obviously, you know, well and meticulously, but it's pretty forgiving in terms of like leaf pulling and things like that. So some of the things I do up there to extend hang time and are not like typical, and so I feel like it's just naturally such a vibrant and healthy site that I can um, you know, manage it and not worry too much. And it's always healthy. Like the yams are always great, and it's just one of these sites. It's just kind of cool, and the fruit comes into the winery every year, and there's just something about it that you can kind of tell it's just special. And I've learned over the years, you know, kind of how to make the Pinot. My first year was 2012. I actually worked with another block called Block 9, and then I realized the aspect of that block wasn't quite right. It tilts slightly north, and then there's a middle block called Block 5, and that's a little north phase 2. I mean, gradual, but there's an inflection there, and then that runs into Block 1, which is where this wine comes from, and it's full south, and so it gets early sun and afternoon sun, and it's just, you know, physiologically, I think always spot on compared to the other two blocks. So that was a learning process. You know, you go through vintages and you kind of understand what the wine wants to be more. And I realized early on, once I got past 2012 into 2013, I realized Four Winds doesn't want to be pushed in terms of extraction. So I really started working with the feminine nature of it, and sort of wanted to accentuate that in my winemaking. And also, like, I limit leaf pulling to try not to get too much color going. I think it's just more appropriate if it's lighter and kind of, you know, definitely lower alcohol. And so I shoot for those things. And I've learned a lot about, you know, Oregon's awesome because we get such vintage variation, but in that it takes a few years to learn a place. And so it just took a little time. And but I think the best wine I made from that site before the 19 was 17. I think I got kind of lucky with 13, and it got put into a blind tasting of Burgundies, and my friend did this to me, and he pulls it out of the bag, and it was my own wine. I dead ringer for a Burgundy, so that was fun. But I was like, okay, that's cool. And then 17, I think I was kind of coming off of working with more whole cluster, and I was kind of done with that. And so I went really back to like a more focused style, destemmed, and just really trying to make it as pristine as I can. And I think the site with the old vines and the Pommard's a good communicator. It's really easy to make good wine out of that. And so it really is about the site and the material, and then, you know, my job is balance and focus. But you know, the story, the handshake deal is, you know, along the way in a career, a wine career, you kind of try and pull history to your own program. And like, whether you work with a producer that influenced you, like I have some Chardonnay barrels from John Paul that I won't let go of, you know, because it kind of reminds me where I've been. And so this story with Patty was just kind of memorable, and the site's become so important. And as I was coming up with a name for the lot, that's sort of what I thought about.
That's really great. I cannot wait to taste this wine. You really given it a lot of personality and backstory. So I'm looking forward to trying that next Thursday. Okay, you're on mute. Unmute. Kate, tell us a little bit about what blend you finally put together for this lot.
That was a hard act to follow. So our blend is made up of 6 different vineyards. Uh-oh. Okay, we're still here. Okay. So while we specialize in single vineyards, there is, of course, I love that sort of zoomed in focus of looking at those single entities. But there is something magical to be said about what each of these sub-AVAs can add to a larger, more complete picture of the Willamette Valley. So we have 6 different vineyards in this lot. 2 of them come from the Amhill Carlton AVA. That's our own estate vineyard here. We have 15 planted acres planted between 02 and 05. And then also from the Shea Vineyard, which we've been working with since 2002. So we get quite a few blocks out of Dick Shea's spot, some very old vines. We then move into the Ollila Amity Hills, where we're working with our own Zena Crown Vineyard, which we've been working with since, I believe, 2006. I might be mistaken. It might be 08. And then we pulled from Ridgecrest, which is up on Ribbon Ridge, and I believe the oldest planted acreage up there from Harry Peterson Nedry. And then we also wrapped in a little bit of Eleve and Bella Vita out of Dundee Hills. And it's just coming from, us as the winemaking team, looking at what each of those specific entities will add to the blend, particularly in 2019, we started for this blend, we started picking in September 18, and we didn't finish until October 9th. So we have a pretty wide variety to play with. Lynn and I felt it was really, really important to delay a lot of our picking to a little bit later. We didn't feel like the grapes were phenologically ripe after that first set of rains. We really rolled the dice whether or not we were going to get back into those vineyards when we did see phenological ripeness. But Oregon granted us some sunshine and some warm days, and we got there. So for me, each of these vineyards are providing this, you get these kind of dusty red fruit notes and these earthy bits from Bella Vita and Eleve coming straight out of Dundee Hills. 2019 really classically admitted those. Zena Crown, our own estate, and Shea, I think, are really providing so much structure. We can talk about clones, but we use just about everything in this blend. We've got 114, 777, 115. I can just go on. And then Ridgecrest. Ridgecrest is such a beautiful vineyard, and you're really getting this like texture and depth and really bringing around those dark fruit notes into this wine. So I just find that working as a composite blend there's a real beauty to it. And I hope that you guys all see that in the glass.
Yeah, thank you very much. Ridgecrest is a new single vineyard for Penarash, yeah?
Yeah, starting in 2018, we brought on a couple blocks. I love working with it. I think it really adds to our portfolio.
Yeah, it's really has a unique characteristic and definitely a different point of view coming into the cellar. It's really
very
great.
much so. Yeah, yep.
Yeah. Thank you so much. We're going to move back to Gilles, and we're going to talk about his Eleusinian mysteries, I think. Do I have that right? We had French earlier. Actually, I needed you then, Gilles, when we had the French one.
That's a mystery complete. No, but like as I mentioned before, okay, the wine you have in front of you is from a Corinne Vineyard, means we acquired in 2018. And we made the wine to learn and to discover the vineyard in a certain way. Or what you have here is, in fact, not a single vineyard, but a single block. There's only 1 acre, Paul Marclone. The specificity of this block, especially, is within 1 acre, it has 2 types of soil. It means it was for the vineyard manager a never-acting situation when I told him to harvest per order of soil. During 2019 was not a fun harvest for a vineyard manager and picking crew between the rains. I'm focused more on terroir. That's really my obsessivity. That's terroir, discover the soil and learning every year the vineyard, what it can do, what we can do, and where we screw up us winemakers, and the potential. This block is for me finesse, elegance. 2019 was really the vintage for that. Definitively the vintage for that. Finesse, elegance, and the Paul Marclone with this type of soil were absolutely perfect for me. I was very enthusiastic about it. We made a wine for fun, really for fun, discovering, learning, and treating like a baby. And with the pleasure to put in a bottle and to give you that guys offering.
Gilles, when you acquire a new vineyard like you did, and you said you need to learn it, of course, what kind of experiments do you do, or what kind of variables are you looking at when you're learning a new vineyard like that?
The first thing we do, in fact, is very simple. Because the grapes before were sold to different wineries, like a Petit Chagrin, Raptor Ridge, Elkov, the first thing I do is talk to the winemakers. And I said, okay, what do you think? Give me your tips here. Give me your idea. And means I have that perspective. Then, as soon as we acquired the vineyard, the first thing we have done is set up a collaborative effect on each blocks. Because we are still continuing fruit, selling fruit, knowing we were in transition organic. And set up, for example, a system where we will all exchange ideas. And everybody participated. I had different wineries who participated to each block, and I was really involved. I'm telling them, okay, I looked at your block, clean, despite the rain, you're fine. Okay, you harvest when you want, but you are safe. Okay, because they're busy during harvest. And we do the same for me.
Mm-hmm.
It means I remember Jim Anderson going to my block and saying, okay, you are cool.
Mm-hmm. No, that's really great. Thank you for sharing.
No, that's a very collaborative effect. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's really neat. We're going to move over to Up and Up, over to Larry Stone and Linga Franca. Up and up the hill.
Yes, up the hill, up the hill. It's, well, not really. It's not, it is uphill, but it's not just uphill. It's up and up because, you know, we named this out in 2020, which I guess You're on Mute was a tribute to in some way. And ours is like, let's forget it. I don't want to remember that year at all, ever. If you know, if I had a drug I could take to forget 2020, I think I would just be happier, but especially the end of it. So I think that this is up and up. You know, things are looking up. We have had it had to look up from then, and I think that it is 2 upper blocks and 1 lower block. The 2 upper blocks are some of our best fruit, and there's the block 3, which is 777 from a Massal selection in the Russian River that I had made sure was clean and brought up here from a nursery that is in nowhere in California. We used it at Evening Land. It's a French nursery called Guillaume, Pépinière Guillaume, or Guillaume Nurseries. And they did Massal selections for us, which no other American nursery would do. And so we had that. I put that in, I thought, my best spots, which are block 1, 2, and 3. Block 1 and 2, they're on what are called now Gelderman soils. When I bought the farm in 2012, it was called Alnikaya. And I go like, well, this is a little different. I think this is the best spot. So I'll put this, I think, the most rounded and most complete in itself clone of Massal selection / clone of 777 that I have, because I think it makes a beautiful wine on its own, and maybe there'll be a special selection from that part of the vineyard. And Plow comes from a little bit higher up on the hill, block 1 and 2. Block 3 went into our first estate wine, but you know, some years it's really even it rivals block 1 and 2. And I think in 19 we had generally really great fruit. It was, you know, someone mentioned how difficult the vintage was because of the rains, but all our harvest was done between October 21st and October 30th. And I mean, sorry, it's not October, September 21st and September 30th. And we picked some fruit, you know, not this fruit, but we picked some fruit before the first rain, and we picked most of the rest between the first and the second rain. And by the third rain, we had just a little bit to clean up. So we didn't really suffer. We didn't have any damage. We didn't see deterioration. We had to wait till the vineyard dried out a little bit, a couple of days after a rain event. But, you know, my team, having worked in Burgundy, was pretty familiar with rain events and how to deal with them. So we had really great fruit. And I think once the decisions had been made to, you know, harvest, we had the cleanest smelling fermenters I have ever smelled in any winery. It was just like, it smelled like wine. The minute it started fermenting, it was just so beautiful and expression, you know, it was a joy. And usually there's some funk, there's a little reduction here and there, then it has to be pumped over something, nothing like that. And the major contributor for this cuvee is actually the worst block that we have in terms of yield. It's a Calera clone. It's taken from a Calera clone that was cleaned up. And the yields, like last year, you know, when we were about to go to harvest, they had like a half a ton an acre. and these are young vines. And we wound up, I think, with this year we have a really good set. Last year was a terrible set, and people may know Calariclone has really a problem with shot berries, or what French would call millerandage, and you wind up with tiny fruit that's infertile, and it kind of falls off mid-season, depending on when the rain event happens and how strong it is. So we had a really bad set because of the rain in spring, and this was just so concentrated, and so, a few berries here and there, and the stems were a lot of space between each berry. Every berry had 360-degree UV sunlight, creating the phenolic flavors, the development of flavors in the grapes. So that's the majority of what this is. So it's actually a very expensive wine. Anybody who buys this is probably our most expensive wine to make, and it's by far the most expensive because the yields are so small. And then the remainder is one lower block. So the two are upper blocks, the Calera block and the block with 777. These are upper blocks, prime upper blocks, shallow soils, Gelderman and Nikaya. But then 113 is on Jory. So that's sort of the mid-palate fruit. It brings a little more power to it. So it's a very lifted wine, but you have the contribution of Jory soils with a little more fruitiness and weight. So it's a beautiful blend. It's about 13% alcohol, and it's very, very ripe at that, because, we know that ripeness is how much sun exposure you have, and sugar accumulation has to do with heat summation. So it was a cooler year, so we didn't have that much heat. But
one theme that I'm hearing over and over here, obviously each of these wines is its own thing, but everybody picked their best. I'm hearing this is my favorite block, this is my best block. So our winning bidders out there should be pretty happy, and your generosity is noted, is really noted. Let's move on to connections. And Matt, tell us a little bit about your wine and why it's called Connection.
All right, so this wine is most people mark a little bit 115, and it was, as I was trying to decide our blends for the year, I was going around tasting all the wines, and I tasted this barrel, and I was like, oh my gosh, and it just screamed at me, single barrel. So I stuck it up in the rafters and said, I'll worry about it later. When the auction came around, it's like, okay, I know what I'm going to taste. So it's just a single barrel from our vineyard. It's an east-facing slope, vines planted in 2003. All of our grapes are estate grapes. Sorry, all of our wines are estate grapes. And it just, everything. It's red fruit, great acid balance. A hint of oak, because the barrel that this was in was a neutral oak barrel, but it's got silky tannins. It's just, I wish I had more of it for myself, put it that way.
Well, you probably did just the right thing. One of the comments that was made on the earlier session from the older winemakers was learning when not to do anything, learning when to back off and to leave it alone. And the fact that you stuck that barrel off in the rafters was probably the smartest thing you did for that. So thank you. That just sounds fabulous. I'm looking forward to next Thursday. Justin, we know what the Prince of Dundee is. Tell us a little bit about this specific wine.
Yes, the Prince of Dundee is not me, and it's not Chris Burrow. I would like to point that out. That's very...
Wait. Let's hear from Chris. He may not agree with that.
No, it's named after the vineyard, Prince of Vineyard, which is, our main foothold in the Willamette Valley. And, there's a lot of themes from this group that I think are important to highlight for us as well. But those kind of finesse, elegance, very charming and bright for me are kind of the descriptors that come to mind. And for us, this auction was a great opportunity to kind of take a really focused lens on Prince Hill, and we kind of are looking at the site through this blend is 100% Clone 95. And Clone 95 is kind of this special story, it's called the Lost Clone for some people, where one of Dick Erath's friends picked it up at Clos Vougeot. It made its way to Davis, and they had all kind of forgotten about it. And Dick Erath got a call one day, kind of like, your vines are ready. And it's this really really interesting clone in that it's somewhat similar to Pommard, but it makes a more complete wine for me. It has a little more tannin impact, which goes really well with the Dundee Hills. And it is a little bit more resistant to any rot, which, you know, served us really well in 2019. And we're in that similar window of kind of that end of September, kind of after that second rain, where you know, we picked, you know, kind of everything that we had. It was like 3 or 4 days where it was, Chris and I were kind of like, okay, it's go time. We feel good about where everything is. We want to capture this kind of elegance and finesse in the vintage, and let's go for it. So we, you know, we didn't do any whole cluster in 2019. So that's the same thing for this cuvee in particular, and really not trying to overdo it. You know, I think we have depth and we have presence at the Prince Hill site, and that comes naturally. And so not really trying to go overboard, I think, was really important in 2019, and kind of getting in and out. And, you know, Larry mentioned kind of those really pretty fermentation smells that kind of came right away. And that's something that you know, definitely resonates with me. And so this is just really, you know, the Prince Hill Vineyard, it's 37 acres, and Dick Erath was really big into experimenting. So we have a lot of little sections, and, you know, a row of this, a row of that. And so this Clone 95 is in a few places, and this comes from kind of the heart of the vineyard. It's sitting at about 600 feet of elevation. And it's just this really, hopefully a kind of complete and complex picture of the vintage. So you have those beautiful, you know, the berry tones, but also kind of that floral and the spice and the depth without being heavy or without being, you know, over the top. So I think it was a really fun opportunity to just take a really small amount. We went for the 10 cases. We wanted to put as much and support as much as we could in there. But I think it's something that, you know, it's showing well now. And I think that ageability is a big conversation around 2019. And I think this bright, you know, finesse is really just going to linger around for quite some time. And so, you know, we're really happy with the vintage in general. And I think this cuvee really tells a specific story that we can't always do, whether it's our Dundee Hills blend or the larger Prince Hill blend of, you know, highlighting this clone, which is pretty unique. And it's something, this is clone thing that we've actually taken cuttings and are putting in some corners of our estate vineyards in California, which is really fun. Just kind of tying those
very cool
there, and you know, just kind of paying homage to this history and this sense of place. That's something that, you know, as Pinot winemakers and Chardonnay, or, you know, winemakers in general, we really love to tell that story and discover how stuff is different and unique. And I think this blend really showcases that.
Justin, how old were these vines?
These vines, Prince Hill was planted in 1984, but the Clone 95 stuff was right around 1997 is when they went into the ground.
Super, thank you so much. Julia, we're getting up to the top of the hour here. Anything we need to, is there some housekeeping or anything we need to do?
You know, I would love to hear super quickly everyone's food pairing for their auction wine, if we have time.
All right, come on, food pairings. Throw them out there.
Okay. Salmon, I'll take it.
We got 2 salmons.
I'll go lamb.
Lamb, 2 salmons, a lamb.
How about the IPNC salmon bake that I'm regretting I'm not at this year?
Excellent. That's excellent. That's really great. That's really great. Anything else, Larry? Come on, Larry, what would you put with it?
I would do quail, grilled quail with a little thyme and maybe a little bit of garlic.
Well, that takes us to high noon and the lunch hour. So I can't, that must be why you asked that, Julia. You were starting to get a little hungry. A little peckish. I can't thank you all enough for being here today and for the generosity of each of you and your companies for supporting the Willamette Valley Barrel Auction. Thank you all very much, and we'll see you all next Thursday. Looking forward
Thanks,
to
everybody.
sipping with you.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye
you,
all.
Eugenia. Thank you,
Eugenia,
panelists.
thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Thank you so much.